Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello and welcome to Calgary's podcast with Mario Tonaguzzi on Canada's Podcast Network. Joining me today is Mark Kondrat, who is CEO of Alberta Beer Festivals and a few other things, and we'll get to talk about those later. Thanks for joining us today, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun to share my story.
All right, well, let's talk about Alberta Beer Festivals. Can you maybe describe for me a little bit about what it is and what you guys do?
Well, currently it's something that is deemed illegal. So, but usually what it is so we've been doing our festival since 2005. Me and my business partner Bill Robinson have been working together probably since 2002. But Alberta Beer Festivals is just a way for us to kind of share the stories of, local breweries, distilleries, restaurants, and also, people that come into the province. So like Alberta is one of the most probably welcoming places in the world in terms of welcoming other breweries and distilleries in to showcase their products. So we have 6 festivals that we do across Alberta. And we try to make them all unique so that they're featuring different things. But ultimately, we want to create an environment where people can share their story, whether, like I said, they're restaurants, breweries, distilleries, and connect directly with consumers. So we're hopeful and we're working hard to make sure that we're able to do that again soon.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't do that these days, can we? So tell me, when you look at the landscape in Alberta, we got an explosion, right, in the last few years of breweries, of distilleries, etc. What are your thoughts on why we're seeing that in the market?
Well, a lot of it has to do with just government policy. So they made the minimums significantly lower. Like the ability to create a brewery 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you had to have like some really deep pockets. So they made it impossible for a lot of people to do it. So once they kind of eliminated those minimums, it made it viable for people to experiment and to try. And so, that's what you saw. I don't know exactly when it was. I think it was around 2013 or something like that. But anyway, and then you just saw that, really Alberta has a great entrepreneurial spirit. So once you give people an opportunity to do things, the entrepreneurial spirit of us kind of kicks in, and then you see the explosion, right? So as soon as the opportunity was there, people started taking advantage of it, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you see, the types of people who are starting this are like all over the place, right? And including people that may have been laid off from jobs, say in the oil patch, or people who are just tired of, working for the man, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think there's an oversaturation of them right now, or not?
I don't believe so. I mean, and I ask that question of them a lot myself. And it's like restaurants. Sadly, you see restaurants close, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's too many restaurants. It's just sometimes certain models don't work in certain situations. But the concept is still viable. I think talking with a lot of breweries these days is what they have to be more careful of is what their model is. And so what you saw years ago was these big breweries popping up that had a lot of distribution, and so they were built to supply a lot of liquor stores with a lot of beer. So that part of it I think is more challenging now than it would have been 5 years ago to be a player in that kind of area of the community. And where you see a lot of opportunity, I think, still is in smaller areas, so smaller towns, specific neighborhoods. So you're first and foremost you're really serving a specific group, and I think what I'm seeing is those guys are being very successful. And once you have kind of your defined neighborhood that you're supporting, you can grow slowly from there. But so I don't think that we've hit saturation per se, but I think people need to be very careful and thoughtful of what their model is going to look like before they start a brewery.
So I'm curious, how did you get involved in this line of work?
So I've always, like, even when I graduated from University of Alberta, and while I was going to school, like most university students, a lover of beer. And I was lucky enough to work for Molson while I was going to Edmonton. And that was back when they still had the brewery there. So it was just a really cool experience. And so I fell in love with the industry and the people that were a part of the industry. But I was always also an entrepreneur, and I knew that I would have to do something on my own. And so this was kind of my way of being able to kind of scratch both of those itches, I guess.
Yeah.
And so when I came back to Calgary, I connected with a friend of mine, and we started doing festivals, and we eventually landed on doing a beer festival. One of our friends, Vern Raincock, that we're so close with, he had an agency, and he said, "Hey, you guys, there's no beer festivals in town. Why don't you guys do a beer festival?" And we thought, yeah, that sounds like a fun idea. So we did it, and the industry really embraced us and did a lot to help us. Back then, it was mostly agencies, and so it was people bringing beer into Alberta. And that's why we called the first one the Calgary International Beer Festivals, because that's what was sexy back then, was all these international beers coming in. And so it's been really cool to be a part of, because we've seen the industry evolve into what it is now, which is, instead of having all of these beers coming in from other countries and provinces and states, most of what we get is local. And so it's really cool to be able to share these guys' stories from a local perspective.
So I'm curious, what were you taking at U of A?
Business. Yeah.
Oh.
So I took commerce, and I went to U of C first, and then I took my last couple of years at U of A. And because I had no friends, I just became like a real nerd in the business faculty. So I was like the president of the market association and stuff like that. So it allowed me to kind of experiment with some projects and kind of, do some entrepreneurial things while at school. So yeah, it all kind of, when I look back at it, it kind of, I was doing in university what I ended up doing essentially as an entrepreneur. So I've been very lucky with that.
Okay, super. Now, you mentioned a lot about being an entrepreneur. One of the other things, or one of the other gigs, I guess you have, is pitched tent coffee. Like, what is that, and what do you do there?
Well, so one of the things that I thought about, I've always loved coffee. You could probably tell that I'm jacked up on caffeine as we speak here.
So am I.
Yeah, but so one of the things over COVID lockdown, I'm married, I got 2 kids, and my wife works from home, and she was already working from home before lockdown, before the first one. And so I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? As I said, my company was kind of at a standstill, and we've always enjoyed drinking good coffee. And I thought, I wonder how shitty things would have to get before our coffee budget became a topic of conversation, because she likes good coffee and I like good coffee. And so it's one of those things where I understand, and I have a lot of respect for the brewing of beer and the process, and how hard it is for these guys and girls to do it. And I've never wanted to brew my own beer. I've always just admired from afar, and I'll enjoy the fruits of their labor. From the coffee perspective, I thought, for some reason, I was just more interested in the process, in terms of like actually getting my hands dirty and getting in there and doing it. So it's just started out as like as an interest, as a hobby. But I got to learn, where, I got to start sourcing the beans. So I have a guy locally that I use, and he's from Colombia. So I always feel like I'm doing like some sort of drug deal when I go to grab my coffee beans. A good friend of mine roasts coffee. He's got his own coffee company. So he's been really nice enough to help me in terms of learning how to roast and package and all that stuff. So it's been a lot of fun. And it also allows me to kind of like be creative in a way that's not like with my other companies, I have partners and stuff like that. So with this one, I can just kind of be creatively a little bit more of a goofball and kind of use that part of my brain, I guess. So it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, you mentioned other companies.
Yeah.
What else do you have on the go?
Well, so most of it is sort of beer related and beer based. So what we've done is we've actually consolidated all of our companies. If people go to letsmeetforabeer.com, you'll kind of see everything. So Alberta Beer Fest is by far our biggest. It's been around forever, and it's what we love. It's what our passion is. And then from that, we have a few projects that we've been working on. So one is Hoppy Pass, which is essentially a scheduling platform that allows people to book tastings, for small groups. And what we want to do with that when things open up is we basically want to take the tools that we've developed through Alberta Beer Festivals and kind of help use those tools, work with breweries to kind of use those tools to drive traffic to their breweries and I should say distilleries as well. So because one of the things that we've learned over time is how do we attract thousands of people to our festivals, and so we can use those same ideas to attract people to these breweries and stuff like that, and to help share stories. So that was the idea with Hoppy Pass, and then we do Beer Fest in a Box, which is essentially what we've done is we have an 8-pack. So every quarter we introduce a new Beer Fest in a Box, and it's just local breweries. So we'll showcase 8 local breweries from across Alberta. And it's just a good opportunity for us to continue to share their story without being able to do festivals. And we get so much awesome feedback from that because a lot of these breweries, because they're available across Alberta, a lot of people haven't heard of these breweries. So it's a really good way to introduce people to these breweries.
Yeah. So where does all this entrepreneurial spirit from your part begin? How did you get into all this and why?
Where did it begin? I don't know where. I don't know. Like my dad was always an entrepreneur, from what I understand. He's still very much with us, so he's just lazier these days. But he was always very entrepreneurial, and he was very, he saw opportunities that weren't necessarily in his kind of lane, and he would go and do them. So I was always exposed to that, and I was never discouraged from doing it. Like I said, even in university, I had a good job lined up. I could have worked for Molson, and I said, I just want to do my own thing. And my dad was always very supportive. He's just like, I don't care. You're the one that's got to pay your rent, not me. So, and then luckily, if you start being an entrepreneur at a young enough age, you're not really getting paid that much from companies. So you can kind of scrape by, and you're also just used to living like a student. So, when you're young, it's the best time to be an entrepreneur because you're used to eating craft dinner 3 times a day and, sleeping on a buddy's couch. So, and it's always just been, and to be honest with you, especially in Calgary, I know Edmonton's the same. I've just been lucky enough to be surrounded by people who, if I've had an idea, that have supported us, and like good friends of the industry that are like, hey, we want to do this, and they're like, sweet, let's do it. So the environment has just been very supportive of me, and continue to do it.
Okay, you're also into podcasting, I see.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have 2 podcasts. So one is Let's Meet for a Beer, and then the other is the Kondrat podcast. So with Let's Meet for a Beer, I've kind of turned that into something where I just share people's stories from the industry, because I think so many of their stories are so awesome, and if I can be a platform to help share those stories, I love to do it. Really, what we try to do is look at everything we do as a platform for people in the beer community to share their stories, and so whether it's, like I said, through the festivals, through Hoppy Pass, through the podcast, through Beer Fest in a Box, it's just a way for us to share those stories. And so that's been awesome. And then the Kondrat podcast is something I do on my own. to share stories of entrepreneurs that aren't necessarily in the beer industry, but there's just so many cool stories, inspiring stories out there, people that are doing things, and people need to hear those stories. I always think, business people and entrepreneurs on some level are very misunderstood in that, people think if someone has a business, though, they must be a millionaire. They don't see the struggles that are behind the scenes and the risks that they're taking. And so, I want to be able to share those stories with people.
So in those sharing of those stories, and for the successful entrepreneurs, have you noticed any common threads of, sort of the secret ingredients, secret sauce of making a successful entrepreneur?
I think, well, I would say one is you have to just keep going every single day. Because especially like right now we live in a world where it's just, because I think the word entrepreneur gets thrown around, and it's because you can call yourself an entrepreneur and then you're an entrepreneur magically.
Right.
But the people that are true entrepreneurs, in my opinion, like it's a lifelong endeavor. It's not I'll be an entrepreneur for a year and then I'll go work for a company. So it's baked into their DNA, a true entrepreneur. And so your time horizon for success might be 20 years. And so you might be failing right now, but you need to somehow summon up the energy to keep going, knowing that your success might be a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. So I think that, and I don't know what that is, but I talk to entrepreneurs all the time, and they just always are like, okay, they're figuring out what their next step is, even in today's environment that's so uncertain. And then I would say the other thing is the successful entrepreneurs that I've been lucky enough to be with help each other. They don't put walls up. They don't see their success. They don't see that if someone succeeds, it's at their expense. Like if my friend succeeds in business, I'm truly happy for him. And I know that the friends that I've built are truly happy to see my success. And we need to build each other up. And if you, in my opinion, anyway, if you're not like that, you're seeing things on too small of a scale. So do everything you can to build up the people around you.
You know what I found, and I have a big sports background. Right, years ago, I was a sports reporter at the Calgary Herald. Right, so I still have that connection with the sports community. But I found is a lot of these athletes have become very successful entrepreneurs, and I think being an athlete teaches you a number of things. Like everything about discipline and perseverance, but more importantly, how to get up when you fall, right? And how to accept failure and move on. And I think that's part of the road to entrepreneurship, because if you can't accept failure, like you're in the wrong business, because you're going to fail at times, right?
Yeah, you're going to fail, and you're going to, and it's a bumpy road, man. You're going to, because it sounds like a good idea at the time, and then you have to go through it to realize, oops, that was a terrible idea. But it's all part of the journey, and you're also going to have cycles where people don't necessarily believe in you, and so you have to believe in yourself to keep going. And one thing that I did realize along the way is what I felt like for myself when I first started out, my motivation was to prove people wrong. People would say, "Oh, you couldn't do that. You can't do that, whatever." And then somewhere along the way, your motivation actually has to, or for me anyway, it had to kind of change, which is being an entrepreneur motivated by the chip on my shoulder. It was no longer what was going to drive my success. It had to be the energy had to go into helping other people, right? So at a certain point along the way, if you've been in the game long enough, people, I think, stop looking at you like, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that. And so you have to find a new motivation, which is helping people. And once you're motivated by helping people, it's like, then things are easy, right? Because every day there's someone you can, share their story or whatever. So
yeah. Now, pardon the pun, but is there any other ideas, entrepreneurial ideas percolating. Get it? Percolating.
Yeah.
In your mind?
There's always ideas. Eventually you got to shut that off and focus on what you're doing. So what I'm really focused on right now is more evolving what we're doing. And so not necessarily creating new concepts, but just saying, okay, how can we make our festivals better? Because what we want to do, this is a really unique opportunity for us. You don't often get your business shut down for a year and a half or 2 years.
Yeah.
So on some level, it sucks. On another level, it's like, okay, well, when we come back, we can reimagine what we do, and we can talk to everybody who is involved in our festivals and see how we can make it better for them. And so hopefully what you'll see when Alberta Beer Festivals comes back is kind of an evolution of what we've wanted to do, because we've had time to sort of sit back and look at it and make things better. And then the other thing is you get to ask yourself why about everything. Okay, why are we doing that? Why are we doing that? And we've always been okay with, we've never been the type of people that are like, oh, that's perfect, don't ask questions with that. Like we rip ourselves apart and try to reorganize things all the time, because we want our shows to be better all the time. We don't want them to be stale and stagnant. So this has kind of been a great opportunity to do that, despite it's been a shitty year too. So you got to take the good and the bad, right?
You bet. All right, super. Well, thanks very much, Mark, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And like I said, if I know you told me that it was video, but I feel like if I would have remembered that, I might have shaved off my grade 9 facial hair. But maybe next time.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mark.
All right.
That was Mark Kondrat, who is CEO of Alberta Beer Festivals and a serial entrepreneur with ideas such as Pitch Tent Coffee and other things. This has been Calgary's podcast with Mario Tanaguzzi on Canada's Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us today.